Would you break away from the most powerful institution on earth and create your own religion, just to marry one woman? Would you tear apart an entire civilization's faith, defy the Pope, burn centuries of tradition to the ground, and risk war with every Catholic nation in Europe, all because you couldn't have one woman? Henry VIII did exactly that, and then he killed her. In 1526, Henry VIII, King of England, was already married to Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess, and had been for 17 years. But Catherine had failed to produce a male heir, and Henry was becoming desperate. Then he saw Anne Boleyn. She was not the most beautiful woman at court. She was not royalty. She was the daughter of a diplomat, dark-haired and sharp-witted in an era that prized blonde docility. She had spent years at the French court and returned to England with a sophistication that set her apart from every other woman Henry had ever met. Henry wanted her as his mistress, Anne refused. Other women had been Henry's mistresses and been discarded when he grew bored. Anne understood that being a mistress was a dead end. She told the King of England, one of the most powerful men on the planet, no, not unless he made her queen. The refusal drove Henry insane with desire. He wrote her love letters that still survive today, extraordinary documents in which the King of England begs like a lovesick teenager. "I beg to know expressly your intention touching the love between us," he wrote, "having been more than a year wounded by the dart of love, and not yet sure whether I shall fail or find a place in your affection." Anne withheld herself for 6 years. 6 years during which Henry became increasingly obsessed. He needed to divorce Catherine to marry Anne, but divorce required papal permission, and Pope Clement VII refused. Catherine's nephew was Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, the most powerful ruler in Europe, and the Pope wasn't about to anger him by annulling his aunt's marriage. Henry's solution was breathtaking in its audacity. If the Pope wouldn't give him what he wanted, he would remove the Pope from the equation entirely. In 1534, Henry passed the Act of Supremacy, declaring himself the supreme head of the Church of England, breaking England away from the Roman Catholic Church in a schism that reshaped the religious, political, and cultural landscape of the Western world forever. He dissolved the monasteries, seized their vast wealth, executed those who refused to acknowledge his supremacy, including his former friend and Lord Chancellor Sir Thomas More, and married Anne Boleyn in a secret ceremony in January 1533. Anne was crowned queen. She was pregnant. The entire kingdom held its breath, waiting for the male heir that would justify everything Henry had destroyed. On September 7, 1533, Anne gave birth to a girl. Elizabeth. Henry was devastated. Over the next 3 years, Anne suffered 2 more pregnancies, including a miscarriage of what appeared to be a male fetus in January 1536. Henry, already growing tired of her sharp tongue and political maneuvering, began to see her as cursed. He had torn his kingdom apart for this woman, and she couldn't give him a son. By spring of 1536, Henry had found Jane Seymour, a quiet, submissive lady-in-waiting who was everything Anne was not. He needed Anne gone. What happened next was a masterwork of political murder. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister, orchestrated charges of adultery, incest with her own brother, and treason against the Queen. The evidence was almost certainly fabricated. The confessions were obtained through torture. 5 men, including Anne's brother George, were arrested, tried, and executed. Anne was tried before a jury of peers that included her own former lover, Henry Percy, who collapsed during the proceedings. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. On May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn walked to a scaffold erected on the grounds of the Tower of London. She wore a grey damask gown with a red petticoat beneath it, the liturgical color of Catholic martyrdom, a final, defiant message. Henry had imported a French swordsman from Calais because the sword was considered more merciful than the axe. Anne knelt, tucked her skirts around her feet for modesty, and reportedly repeated, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul," over and over until the blade fell. She was 35 years old. 11 days later, Henry married Jane Seymour, the man who had created an entirely new church, broken with 1,000 years of tradition, and executed some of his closest friends, all to marry Anne Boleyn. Didn't even wait 2 weeks after cutting off her head to replace her. Jane Seymour did give Henry his son, Edward, but she died 12 days after childbirth. Henry went on to marry 3 more times, 6 wives in total. He never found what he was looking for. But the daughter Anne gave him, The baby girl that disappointed Henry so deeply that he couldn't bear to look at her, grew up to become Elizabeth I, one of the greatest monarchs in English history, who reigned for 45 years, defeated the Spanish Armada, presided over the English Renaissance, and built the foundations of the British Empire. Anne Boleyn lost her head, but her daughter changed the world.